watching from the internet. It's time for some Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide. The Final Fantasy VI, or as those in North America know it, Final Fantasy III. Randomizer. It is an open world randomizer, and we have two people that are going to race one another, playing the same exact seed that we have randomized. We'll talk about the game itself and about what our runners have to do in order to beat the game. My name is TheSchwantz27. I am joined by Turdsman, doing commentary alongside of myself. Turdsman, how's it going tonight?
Going pretty great. Really looking forward to watching these two titans duke it out.
Alright, so let's talk about what Worlds Collide actually is. So, Worlds Collide is an open world randomizer for Final Fantasy VI, and there are lots of different things that are randomized. The contents of chests and shops are randomized, the spells that espers teach, the rates at which they are taught, the enemy encounters, the bosses are actually shuffled amongst their positions, same with dragons, so we're not going to get any duplicates. The abilities on characters are also randomized, and where you find said characters and espers is also randomized. Everybody starts with the airship, and you can go anywhere you'd like between two worlds. How the game sort of works is you have to go to particular world events or checks of the original game, and those are gated by whatever characters you've currently recruited. So in this little example, if you have Edgar, you can get a reward, which is either a character, esper, or item by visiting the Figaro throne, clearing out the engine room, or going down to the ancient castle. So we kind of tied in the events of the character with their particular checks in order to get rewards. Once a set number of players has found whatever it is that they're looking for to unlock Final Kefka, the goal of the game is to defeat Final Kefka, going through Kefka's tower, and then challenging the final boss. Did I miss anything, Turdsman?
I guess the one thing to definitely keep in mind in that the box in the upper right there is that enemies and bosses are scaled throughout the game, and in this particular case, they're going to be gaining power, HP, and the experience that they hand off to everybody is going to go up with characters and espers found. So the more progression that our players happen to come across, that means that the enemies that they run into are going to be tougher as well.
Yeah, unlike in some other RPGs, this is progression-based scaling, not location-based scaling. So your characters will sort of snowball up in levels, but so will all of the enemies that you're fighting in the game. So the objective is to gain as much power as possible and create sort of 4 builds for your characters so that you could take on the final boss. They can be in the form of big sharp sticks, they could be in the form of nice spells on shiny stones, or they could be using that character's random ability that they are assigned when you actually go and recruit them. So we'll sort of explain some of the other different nuances as we go along. What are some of the things that are not randomized? So the drops that enemies can give after a battle, same with the things that you can steal from enemies. There is an option to randomize them, but in these particular settings, we are not randomizing them. You could also randomize the boss locations. So we have the bosses are shuffled, so we're not going to see the same boss twice instead of randomized where you could see bosses multiple times. The boss weaknesses are also the same as vanilla, which is the same for a lot of battle scripts, except for the abilities. They get scaled upwards or downwards with the scaling that Turdsman sort of talked about earlier. Anything else that I'm not remembering that is not randomized from the vanilla game? The abilities of the weapons that you pick up. So their battle power, yes, and the things that they do. So you're not going to see like some swords that will automatically cast some spell that they weren't able to in the vanilla game, right?
Yeah, and like you mentioned, a lot of these options are things that you can choose to randomize when you're making the game, but this is a kind of slightly modified version of our standard Ultros League race race league that we hold. Managed to get about 3 or 4 of those in a year too.
Yeah, so we have lots of different events throughout the community, and we have sort of a standard racing league that we have where it's sort of ELO based, but it's also based on Grand Prix standings and European football standings, where the bottom 2 players get relegated and the top 2 players from a lower division get promoted. Yeah, so is there anything else we want to talk about before we get started here, Turdsman?
I mean, something that this is a personal fun thing that I like quite a bit. The Coliseum also gets randomized. The available items and what you get from your bet will be randomized. So whereas in the original, if you bet a tonic, you see Chupa, he sneezes at you, and you just wasted about 45 seconds of your life. But in this version, that tonic could potentially trade up for a Ragnarok sword or a Genji glove or things like that. And they'll have access to that information as well. So we get going here. Gogo, Edgar, and Strago as a start.
Yeah, so we already talked about the different areas that Edgar will unlock throughout the game. So let's talk about Gogo and Strago. So Gogo only has one check in the game, and that is where you recruit them in the vanilla game in the belly of the Zone Eater. And Strago has 3 different areas or checks. One is the Burning House, or as we like to call it in the community, the Casa del Fuego, where you can go and fight a bunch of different dancing flames that are randomized enemy encounters. So here is an interesting thing that just happened on Drinks Glue's screen.
Ooh, I forgot about that.
5% of the treasure chests in the game are going to be monsters in a box. So you have to be careful when opening up your treasure chests not to get your hands caught in the cookie jar. Now, in standard flags, this is at 0%, but we wanted to give our runners a little wrench with some beef and some spice. In addition, we do have some options that the randomizer can do for a marathon type setting, and you're seeing Nobody War doing one of them here. So if our game is selected, we normally have an incentive for the runners to perform in the classic opera cutscene, where they do have to select the correct lyrics or they get booed off the stage. And we also have a potential bid war incentive in the beginning of the second half of the game. You either have to feed Sid enough fish to save them, or you could not feed him enough fish and he will die. So that is a bid war incentive that we could also potentially have for our marathon. And for the purposes of this submission, we have automatically selected that we are saving Sid. We're going to pretend like the community is very nice upon the war criminal that is Sid. So we're going to save him for this run. That might not be the case in the real run if selected.
And it's kind of interesting. It's sort of similar to a lot of save the animals, kill the animals type things. But with Sid, it's roughly the same amount of time for each one. I think it's based on which fish pop up. You might get really lucky and have a bunch of fast ones show up, but either way, you're going to be you're not necessarily saving any seconds by taking out the. I want to be nice to Sid, but
well, we will certainly explain the nuances of the Sid saving or dying mechanic once we get there. There is going to be some math, unfortunately, in this stream. This is a RPG randomizer after all. We did, however, get a character that has the throw ability, which is normally Shadow's vanilla ability, with Gogo. And Gogo's special ability is that they can mimic anything without having to use that item from the inventory, or even if that item in the inventory is gone. So in the case of throw, Gogo can actually mimic a thrown object, even if that object is not anymore in their inventory. So Gogo plus throw is a very powerful start early on here, Turnsman.
Yes, a fantastic one to find. That also works with breakable rods and shields, and it will not take an additional item from your inventory. That also applies to throw. And to pair up with that, I believe Strago had the Magitech ability, which normally was reserved to those big rad walking mechs that you get very sparingly in the vanilla game, but Strago figured out how to do that by himself, which is another excellent ability for Go-Go to mimic if it gets upgraded through doing the Magitech facility checks.
Yeah, so the Magitech ability, as with some of the other abilities in Worlds Collide, we do have the ability to shuffle or randomize amongst the characters some of those part-time abilities like Banon's Health, the Magitech from the armor, even Leo's Shock is a possibility, so we'll keep an eye out for those particular character commands that may get shuffled and randomized. So I sort of cut myself off earlier for the Opera House when we were talking about Strago's checks. So Strago's first check is the Burning House that we talked about. Another one of his checks is Ebbett's Rock, which I didn't even realize was a place you can go before I started playing the Randomizer. It's one of those side quests in the vanilla game that you don't really know about, and I didn't. And his other last check is the Fanatic's Tower, and it does have the same gimmick as the vanilla game where you can only use magic in it. In this particular seed, we do have our enemy scaling based on the number of characters, plus the number of espers, plus the number of dragons that you kill. So dragons are completely optional in this set of options. However, they do add to scaling, and they do offer some other benefits, Turdsman. Can you talk about a few of those for us?
Oh, sure. Well, in addition to just giving out big gobs of XP and magic points, which our characters are going to need to learn spells off of espers that they find, they also will drop the item that they dropped in vanilla. So that's, I think, stuff like the Magus Rod on the Dirt Dragon, the Pearl Lance from the White Dragon, stuff like that. But they will also award the runner with an additional high-tier item alongside the regular drop that they give. And there's a list of them that you can look at when you're looking at all the options in the beginning. I believe Drinks Glue had some time on camera looking at some of the options. There's a lot of all the best weapons are in there, and a lot of the best armor as well.
Yeah, so our runners are digging in some chests and are looking in some shops here. So in the early game, we start with nothing really. The vanilla like default equipment, which is usually pretty awful for our characters. We do start with $5,000, but that's really about it. So early on, we're also on level 3. So our runners are trying to go to different places in order to loot some chests and to check on the shops to see what they're selling. The shops are randomized plus a percentage shuffled, so they're all shuffled amongst themselves plus a percentage randomized rather. And the amount of money that things cost is random, but within a range of what the vanilla cost would be. So that is from, I believe, 75% to 125%, but it might be more or less. However, items are going to cost around what they would in vanilla, save for those really high ticket items. The Worlds Collide community sort of customized how much those will buy and sell for.
Yeah, like elixirs, for example, in the base game, they just sell for that 1 GP, but in Worlds Collide, they usually sell for around between like 8,000 and 12,000, which can be a really nice way to get a couple extra bucks at the beginning of your run if you know you're not going to if you know that you're the type of person to just hang on to that until the very end of the game and then not use it on the final boss. Now you finally can get some immediate benefit from finding a high tier consumable item.
Yeah, so we do have a question from the chat. Do these flags have a skip unlock if you hit enough checks plus dragons? So in this case, there is a concept called the Kefka Tower skip, where you could actually jump into Kefka's Tower at the point where you would fight the 3 statue bosses in the vanilla game at those switches. So in this particular set of options, if we get extra characters, 9 characters instead of the 6 required, if we get extra espers, 12 instead of the 9 that we have, or we do 22 total checks, then we will be able to use that one-time Kefka Tower skip. So if that comes up later on in the seed, we'll certainly point it out and keep an eye on it. Nobody War did, however, do the first check of the seed and got the Unicorn Esper off of the Figaro throne. That's what we would consider a free check. In other words, you don't have to take a fight in order to obtain that particular reward.
Yeah, and they tend to be a little bit more strategically selected. In a normal check, you usually fight a boss or a handful of fixed encounters. So by the end of it, your characters are a little bit stronger. You might have learned a couple of spells, gained a few levels, or maybe even found a rare drop or something like that along the way. So the extra scaling that happens from the reward you get at the end won't necessarily hurt you too bad.
Mm-hmm.
But taking too many free checks at the beginning can mess you up shortly afterwards if you run into a really nasty random encounter or a boss that you can't quite get enough damage done to them. Because their HP scales up pretty quickly. A lot of the late game bosses, even at level like 10 or 12, can have 10,000 plus HP.
So, Turdsman, I also noticed that other than, Nobody War trancing through the desert to get back to their airship, that our runners aren't actually coming face to face with random encounters unless they pulled it out of the chest. Why is that?
Well, in my opinion, the best thing that this randomizer does is it gives you 3 Moogle charms at the beginning of the game, so that you can make sure that all of the split party at the end, when you're going through Kefka's tower and you have to separate all of your characters into 3 different parties to climb up there, will not have to run into random encounters. You can, if you want, as we saw Nobody War pop that off and got a somewhat unfortunate, encounter that did not provide any actual experience, unfortunately. But that is something that you get to decide along the way, whether or not this is a good time for you to take a few fights to juice up your levels a bit before going into your next check.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where we give the runners the ability to do that or not. Remember, we start on level 3, and going by some math that we're going to do here, Nobody War's enemies are at level 8, and Drinks Glue's enemies are currently at level 6. So generally speaking, you don't want to fall too far behind where that threshold is for your own characters versus the enemies that you're going to fight here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, especially at the beginning, when level 3 for all of your characters is a rough place to be, unless you happen to find an item that increases their max HP by a percentage. You're probably not going to see anybody at 100 HP. Like Edgar there is one of the tankiest characters in the game, and he's only got 75. So getting those extra 3 or 4 levels at the beginning just for the ability to not get one-shotted by just whatever happens to come across is pretty important.
So let's talk about sort of the specifics of this particular individual game. We did find both a Dragonhorn and Dragoon Boots for Nobody War. So he is using that to change Edgar's fight ability into jump, which will allow him to get multiple attacks per turn at the cost of being up in the air for 1 turn. So it is definitely a good option for an endgame build, especially on Edgar, who can naturally equip the best lances in the game. So in Worlds Collide, you can choose how good or bad your character's equipment pool can be. In our case, it is everything they could wear in the vanilla game, and then a 33% chance of something that they couldn't wear in the vanilla game. So Edgar's usually a pretty good character to do with jump. However, we also have Magitech that you mentioned, and Go-Go to mimic either a thrown item or a Magitech beam.
Yeah, and I like this play from Nobody War. I might have waited a little bit before getting some jump strats going, since Edgar also has access to throw, but Go-Go can pop that into his menu as well through the status screen, which that's the thing that I did not know about for the longest time when I played this game when I was a kid. I did not much care for Go-Go up until recently.
Yeah, the things that you learn speedrunning a game, right?
There are so many items. There's so many items.
There's
in this game.
there are 255 items in this game because of SNES math. So Nobody War here took off the Moogle Charm and hopes to get eaten by the Zone Eater so that he can go down into the belly and grab Gogo's reward at the end there. We do see that Unicorn teaches a couple of different spells, Bolt 2 and X-Zone. X-Zone is very important because while our runners are essentially trying to kill off what's in front of them to progress through the seed, in the back of their mind, they always know that they have the Kefka fight and they do have to kill it, and instant death is one of the things that helps out on that final fight. Meanwhile, Drinks Glue gets caught by Ultros and Chupon in the sky. So this is normally the Doomgaze spot, which is one random pixel on the World of Ruin overworld, and thankfully he is somewhat prepared for this. He can get through this, I believe.
Oh yeah. This is one of those sweet and sour situations too, because unfortunately this fight does not provide any rewards whatsoever. No XP, no magic points. You don't even get the $10 that Ultros is usually hanging on to in all of his other fights.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It just sneezes you off, and I mean, you still get this, so Drinks Glue will get access to this item, but...
Yeah, so since that is a glowing thing and not a glowing stone, that is a Behemoth suit, which is one of the high-tier items that you can get from a check. And we'll see Nobody War also gets a high-tier item from that check in the form of a Minerva. So I think I'd rather have the Minerva than the Behemoth suit in that case. What do you think, Turdsman?
Yeah, the Minerva is incredible. Oh, wow. Man, I got completely sidetracked by those Illumina. Yeah, I just went straight for the Illumina for the Magic Hat. Yeah.
So
get as many of those as you can.
So, as Turdsman mentioned, the Coliseum in Worlds Collide it is randomized. So the thing that you bet is randomized, the item that you get as the reward is randomized, and the enemy that you have to fight is also randomized. So we give our runners a list beforehand to see what you bet, what you get, and they obviously, unfortunately, won't see the enemy that they have to fight until they've already selected. However, knowing what you're going to get for what you're going to bet is usually a pretty good thing. Because in this case, we're getting a very powerful endgame sword for a less than 1,000 GP piece of armor, and that'll be nice for Edgar, because Edgar can naturally use that Illumina there.
And there is, like you mentioned earlier, the 33% chance that any of the other characters will get to swing that around as well. We'll see how many Illuminas Drinks Glue wants to pick up, because in addition to being a very good attack weapon, it's also not a bad thing to put in your shield hand as well. If our runners run into a Genji Glove, then that allows a character to equip 2 weapons at once. And the Illumina, while it doesn't have a defense stat, it has a pretty good evasion and magic evasion stat, so it can be pretty helpful in the offhand.
But Turdsman, in Final Fantasy VI, the evasion stat doesn't matter at all.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. One of the things that this randomizer does as well is correct a lot of little bugs and quirks that are part of the original, and all of those things are optional if you really want to play with the evade bug on, have a good time. You can set that as well, but in a lot of our standard races, the evasion bug is turned off, so that means that blind is also a very nasty status ailment to run into. And some other things like the timers. I know there's a weird glitch to kind of teleport to the end of the game via the timed events. We have that fixed up. I believe the Psycho Cyan glitch, as it's commonly referred to, is also fixed up as well.
The Vanish Doom glitch is also fixed, so
sad to see that one go.
Cannot cheese your way through a Worlds Collide seed, unfortunately. So again, talking about the action that's going on screen here, Drinks Glue ended up grabbing the Illumina out of the Coliseum, and it looks like he is doing the Edgar checks. So Edgar as we mentioned earlier, gives us access to the Figaro throne, which we saw from both of our runners, as well as the ancient castle and the engine room. And you need to clear out the engine room before you go to the ancient castle. So that looks like where Drinksglue is going here. Meanwhile, Nobody War taking a different route. He is going to Ebbett's Rock, which is one of Strago's checks. And one last thing, we did see Nobody War look at the bottom of Fanatic's Tower. You can see what the reward is at the bottom. And it is Mog. So we may potentially get a fourth character here by completing the Fanatic's Tower check. And there is another character for the engine room.
Now, Celeste is a very good find right now. The checks that she unlocks are the Opera House fight, so you don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of doing the song again. You just kind of skip right to the good part where you walk through the rafters and beat up a bunch of rats. There, you'll be able to find something in the South Figaro basement, where you find her in Locke's scenario early on in the original game. But most importantly for this party composition, you will also have access to the Magitech facility, which is a 3-part check. It's got, I believe, 4 bosses total.
That's correct.
Throughout it, and the little minecart ride at the end. But the fantastic reward that Drinksglue will likely be going after soon is it unlocks the remaining abilities in the Magitech command. So Strago will have access to all of the cool stuff that Terra can do at the beginning of the game, like tech missiles, that's the moneymaker, but also having access to Xfer, and sometimes a Bioblast is kind of nice.
Or Confuser. If we
Confuser's good too, yeah.
But yeah, so we do have just the 3 elemental beams and the heal beam for now, but we can upgrade that with the Magitech Factory. And this is our first boss fight. It's SR Behemoth on our bed of tentacles, and it is Vargas and the Apple Toilets, the iPoos here for Nobody War.
So Senior Behemoth, I just did that without even thinking about it. That's sort of the joke. But as you see Drinksglue here using X-Zone on them, why did that work, Schwantz?
Yeah, so X-Zone allows us to kill bosses that are not susceptible to are susceptible to instant death. In Worlds Collide, normally in the vanilla game, you would be able to just throw a Phoenix down on SR Behemoth and that would be the end of that fight. However, we thought that was kind of cheesy. So in Worlds Collide, we have an option that says, hey, remove the undead property from bosses. And that's what we did for that fight. So SR Behemoth, Sriracha Behemoth, Senor Behemoth, Srantium Behemoth, whatever you think SR stands for. His second phase is actually undead, but also susceptible to instant death. However, the undead property overrides that in the vanilla game. But since we remove that in Worlds Collide, you can actually go ahead and kill the boss with a Doom or X-Zone spell. We'll also see that for the Phantom Train later on in the seed if we find the train. Hopefully we get Blitz so we can suplex said train, but unfortunately there are no guarantees because we have no idea who gets to use Blitz. And I believe I saw lore and natural magic for Celeste. And one of the lores that Celeste has is Grand Train, which is the most powerful lore in the game. We do give our runners, I think, 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 lores to start off with. And you can learn a lore just by watching it, and it doesn't have to even be your lore user.
Yeah, she has a very good list. I know I saw Blowfish in there, and I think I also saw Pearlwind. So very good Celeste for Drinksglue to find here.
Alright, so Nobody War unfortunately getting only an offering there. It's a very powerful relic, and he does have a sniper, so is able to create a offering type build with that sniper weapon. However, he's going to go into the Burning House here, or at least into Thamasa, to see what else he can find. And Drinksglue is going to continue on here to the Ancient Castle. There is no required boss fight in the Ancient Castle. However, there is an optional dragon here. So, Turisman, what do you think? Do we think we'll see a dragon fight in this scenario?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Drinksglue just fired off a bunch of sleeping bags on everybody. I think he's getting ready to go dragon hunting.
All right.
As we see Nobody War going into the hothouse here.
Yeah, so in the Burning House, there are two different types of encounters. So the first one we'll see is the Trooper, and the other ones are also randomized to something that are not a bunch of balloons or grenades. And hey, there is another character in Edgar's checks, and this one is Setzer with health. So Setzer will remain on the bench for now because our other characters in our party are way better here.
Yeah, and I believe Cure 2 was on that unicorn, which kind of nullifies the need for a health user. Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah, so... Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
F's in the chat for Drinks Glue there.
White Dragon bringing his A game today. Let's see what Drinks Glue's GP value was. That is the digit... Oh, 6. That's... Yep, okay. Everybody's level 12, and he has 6. That's a tough needle to thread. So, level Pearl, what it does is it takes the last digit of your GP total and uses that as its multiplier for, to determine how many characters it's going to hit. So in that particular case, since it was 6 and everybody was at level 12, everyone just got stomped by two back-to-back Pearl casts.
Yeah, so you did mention earlier, Turdsman, that the dragons will give our characters XP. What's that all about? In the vanilla game, dragons and bosses don't give any XP.
Oh wow, you're right. Actually, I completely forgot that. So yes, we do have it set up in this randomizer for bosses and dragons to give out XP. This makes this whole thing run so much more smoothly. That way, if you go through a check and you don't take any random encounters along the way, you can still end up with a couple extra levels at the end, and that is based on the relative difficulty of the enemy. If you run into Welk, one of the early game bosses, for example, you're not going to get quite as much experience as taking down Guardian, for example.
Yeah, all of the bosses in the game have a set XP per level sort of multiplier, and the more difficult bosses have a higher amount of XP per level, and some of the easier ones have a lower amount. The dragons are 200 XP per level, which are some of the highest in the game. 250, I believe, is the maximum that we did for things like the statue bosses, Magimaster, Doomgaze. Those more difficult bosses are going to be the ones with higher XP gains for the particular runner here.
And of course, the idea there too is those bosses. They're not going to be as strong as they were in the original game, but they're a lot more likely to have some nasty moves behind their back. Pretty much anything that can use a non-elemental attack will wind up with something really, really dirty, especially around like level 15 or so when they start throwing out Blowfish, which just does a flat 1,000 damage.
So, unfortunately, we did not learn the Mute spell, which is the natural weakness of the White Dragon. Remember I said that some of the things that are not randomized are the weaknesses of the bosses and the dragons. However, Glue is taking on this White Dragon for a second time. I have a question for you again, Turdsman. Doesn't the White Dragon usually cast Pearl 3 times to start? Why do we get level question Pearl instead?
That is a function of the ability scaling that you talked about at the beginning of all this. It'll take, in general, the same element. The Flame Eater, for example, uses a bunch of fire attacks. At a high level, it'll start using stuff like Atomic Ray and Flare Star and all the really nasty ones. But if you catch it at a much lower level, it'll only be using Fire 1. I forget if Blaze is part of that. Little weaker stuff. So that is another way that the scaling the levels can affect an encounter.
Yep, that makes sense. So this Welk here is going to give us some lightning magic back at us, and depending upon how high of a level it is, depends on how mean that magic spell is. And this time it was only a Bolt Edge, which is probably on the higher end of things compared to a regular Bolt or Bolt 2. But if we encounter Welk much later, he can use Bolt 3, or Gigavolt, or one of the more powerful abilities. And it's another item for Nobody War. Ouch.
Ooh. Yeah, Strago's checks tend to be pretty unpopular amongst the community, and not necessarily for these reasons, but he's not doing himself any favors.
Yeah, so that's what we would call a dead check, meaning it's a reward that is not a character nor an Esper, and he's just ran into two of them in a row, and I believe they were both... No, that one was a Dragon Horn, and the other one was an Offering. Drinksglue's Dragon also dropped a Dragon Horn, how appropriate, and he's on his way out of the Ancient Castle with Setzer in tow now. So what can we do now that Drinksglue has Setzer in his party?
So Setzer gives access to, honestly, I think some of the faster checks in the game. You can get a free check at Kohlingen Inn, where you find him in the World of Ruin in the vanilla game. Fixed dice there in the shop. He can equip those naturally. On top of that, it will also give access to Daryl's Tomb, which is kind of a weird puzzle dungeon in the original game, but if you know what you're doing, you can get through it pretty quick. And something that isn't going to help Drinksglue out too terribly much is you can select the Doomgaze fight from a menu if you have Setzer in your team. But since Glue ran into him naturally, that's not going to be that's just not going to be an option on the menu. He's already taken care of that one.
Yeah, he ran into him accidentally there. So Nobody War does have the boots and the horn, and saw the fixed dice in the shop there. We'll see if he goes back to purchase that. Fixed dice is one of the more interesting and divisive items, I believe, in the community, where it will do tons and tons of damage early on. It sort of tapers off later, but the animation for it is so hideously long, and this is a speed run after all. Right, so we're trying to do things as fast as possible. So the question is the length of the animation worth the damage that it does? As we see the South Figaro prisoner spot for Glue, so that's Shoat for them. And Nobody War is going to climb up this Fanatics Tower here, only with the ability to use magic in order to get that Mog at the bottom.
So I do like this play from Nobody War. He knows that it's going to be a character at the top. He's learned a few spells. There was Bolt 2 on that Unicorn, and all of the elemental shields will teach the level 2 spell related to the element of the shield. So Flame Shield gets you Fire 2, etc. So he has a decent amount of magic power to throw at this, but also has been doing checks and has not been increased scaling. So Nobody War, I believe, was around level 18.
That's right.
I think when I saw his menu last, which puts him at about 10 levels above whatever he's going to run into.
All right, so Drinksglue doing another free check and getting another Esper. So Drinksglue's party is probably around the same level, but his enemies are going to be at least level 18. So a very big difference between the two, as we do see Nobody War is going to take on one of the dragons here, and it looks like he's going to go for throwing the Flame Shield, which does a maximum damage tier 3 elemental spell, and is going to use Go-Go to mimic that shield. Remember, even if that Flame Shield is gone from your inventory, which it was after that first break, Go-Go can continue to mimic that particular ability, and that will go ahead and take care of that dragon very fast. Another offering that he doesn't need because he already has one, but hey, we could sell it and go buy that fixed dice if we really wanted it.
That's true. Another feature of the breakable items in this game is that it completely ignores the reflect status, and it ignores magic defense, so it can be a very, very useful item to crack in an emergency, or if you're running into something that has particularly high defensive values, but you don't quite have anything that'll pierce through it.
Alright, so we do give our runners a high tier item at the top of Fanatics Tower to replace the gem box. In this case, it is a Force Shield. And we do have to do this fight now that we've taken the item out of the chest. However, this will allow us to get the reward all the way down at the bottom. Meanwhile, Drinksglue, as you mentioned, Turdsman, will head into the Magitech factory in order to get his potential 3 rewards and unlock the full set of Magitech abilities for his Strago character.
Yeah, the Magitech facility is very interesting. It's not the longest walk. Most of the time is going to be spent on the minecart ride near the end, but there are a ton of items hidden away in little alcoves in this dungeon. So if you happen to be needing a couple pieces of equipment, you can come here early on and kind of dip into some little side rooms to get a few extra chests.
So, Nobody War is in Fanatic's Tower up against Piranhas. Now, I know in the vanilla speedrun, there is usually an audio cue that runners will wait for in order for them to attack to get the Resopas Piranha to come out. In Worlds Collide, we've actually randomized the amount of time that Resopas comes out between 5 seconds and 55 seconds on a multiple of 5. And I don't know about you, Tarsman, but it always feels like 55 and not the 5. So Nobody War here is going to go ahead and just wait out the time anyway, so that this way he knows he's going to get Resopas coming out whenever he kills this last Piranha here.
Yeah, it feels like longer than 55 seconds to me every single time, and I know it's not. But and I think something that might hurt with that is that time doesn't tick down when you're in a menu or something like that. It has to be, ATB time. So you want to just kind of hang out on the main screen there and wait for it to click down. Drinks Glue, however, fought off Kefka, so GG's, and got a Esper for his trouble with Ice 3 on it, which is a very useful spell to have.
Well, that Esper was also very useful to have. It was Siren, and Siren is able to mute the entire enemy wall, whatever it is. And that's particularly useful on Tier 2 of the final boss, where one of the pieces, called Magic, can hilariously be muted and thus nullified. Bit of an oversight, I think, there from Kefka to code it up that way.
Yeah, he wasn't thinking very hard when he made that one.
Nobody War doing the long walk back down the tower. What was up with Square in the 90s with giant long towers that you had to walk up and down? There was this in this game. There was Shinra Tower in Final Fantasy VII. I believe there's like isn't there like a colloquial term for one of the quote unquote tower glitches in Final Fantasy IV as well?
Ooh, I don't remember. I am not as familiar with Final Fantasy IV, but
Speaking of Final Fantasy IV, thank you, Free Enterprise, for the raid with a party of 74. Welcome, welcome. Learn all about Worlds Collide here, including this Moogle at the bottom of the tower, under the spell of the cultists of Kefka here.
Mog was just, he had to do something with his time after the world ended.
Yeah, apparently these guys in hoods know what the word Kupo means, so shout out to them. Alright, so unfortunately Drinks Glue gets a fixed ice as a reward there from the second part of the Magitech Factory, and is going to go through the most grueling part of the Magitech Factory, and it's not because there are 3 forced encounters and then 2 bosses. It's because of the way the Mode 7 graphics hurt my eyes. Please avert your screen if you can't handle it here for Drinks Glue. And it looks like Nobody War is going to go ahead and think long and hard about buying those fixed ice for his jumping Edgar here. Unfortunately, I don't think Mog can use them. I think that's what he was looking for there.
Yeah, trying to double up on that. And it looks like got rid of that extra Dragon Horn as well.
I have been corrected in the chat. It is the Forked Tower, or the Phoenix Tower in Final Fantasy V, also being a climb. Yeah, so lots of stairs and steps and glitches and.
There's a couple of real big towers. I remember the Tower of Zot in Final Fantasy IV giving me some trouble, but they really went off the deep end with this one in 7 in terms of going up a bunch of stairs.
Yeah, and
at least in 7 you don't have to come back down.
Yeah, so there have been proposals throughout the years of the community to not do all of the steps, but it turns out that there is an event tile that forces your party, when you step on it, that's when the magic only thing gets activated, and you have to step on it again to make it go back to normal. And so if you were to just warp out, then you would have magic only for the rest of your life, and that would be bad. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't quote-unquote fixed that. So it's kind of an interesting thing there.
Yeah, I think in general, a lot of the changes are trying to work around the code in Final Fantasy VI rather than really seriously edit it.
All right, so
Which works for... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say Nobody War here is going to pick up their 2 next characters. So they will be at 6 already, and they only have 1 Esper. So if I'm a runner and I already have all of the characters I need, does that change my routing and where I'm going to go? Because there are certain attributes of checks that are things that you can peek what the reward is, or things that are Esper and item only versus character Esper item. Is that sort of what happens to you, Turdsman?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is where I would be doing the peekable checks, especially after 6. But honestly, I'd probably try to do it after 4 to just get a couple extra Espers under my belt. Mog's a good one for that.
Yeah, so look at what we got at the end of the minecart ride here, folks. It is a Magi Master. So, Turdsman, you want to explain how this fight goes, or is supposed to go?
Yeah, this is a worst case scenario type situation here. Magimaster is a nasty customer. He's got very high physical defense and very high physical evade. So even if you do happen to have a Valiant Knife, for example, it's just not really going to successfully hit him. His magic defense is a little bit easier to punch through, but he will use wall change every single time that he is damaged, which will change what his current weakness is. But there's no way to actually know really what's going on. In this case, though, there are some ways around it. The most popular one is Magimaster is, for some reason, weak to Berserk. So if you just hit him with Berserk right away, he will just do a really bad regular attack over and over again. But Drinks Glue did another interesting thing.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone do this before, so this is very interesting.
The Reflect status, if you inflict it on Magimaster, will cause him to cast spells on himself rather than the party. In the vanilla game, this works the way that you would expect it to because he's using regular spells. However, in Worlds Collide, since the ability scaling doesn't necessarily differentiate between spells or lore or that weird nebulous third category of monster abilities, casting Reflect on Magimaster will cause him to sometimes use stuff on himself that will do damage. Yep. But wall change has already up. At the beginning of the, I forgot to mention, at the beginning of the fight, he doesn't have any weaknesses or immunities, so you can just cast Reflect on him and just kind of wait for him to take care of himself. But Drinks Glue thought that he had enough offense to take him out a little bit faster, and he was right.
Whoa, Turdsman, where's the ultimate? What happened there?
Well, that's another very good thing that the Worlds Collide randomizer does is you can shut that off or on. In the original game, it was kind of a test to see if you had found the Life 3 spell or not. But in Worlds Collide, that can come up in a lot of very strange places, so you might not necessarily...
Or you might not ever get Life 3.
Right, yeah.
You're not guaranteed to ever learn the spell. So, since you're not guaranteed to ever learn the spell, in order to prevent that boss from being a hard wall soft lock, we disabled the Ultima counter at the end there. You can obviously turn it back on if you really want to, and it will be morphed into whatever non-elemental ability that the game decides it will be, because remember the elemental scaling rule. But most of the time, it's going to be a really, really powerful, high damage spell.
Yeah, it might turn into something single target, which would be nice if it ends up being something that you have to deal with. But in general, that guy's hard enough already.
Yep. Yeah, Magimaster, the only ways to defeat him are with defense ignoring physical attacks if you could actually hit him. And that is a really cheap Zen Thief stone, $56.50. Anybody call Van Halen for the Zen Thief there. So I think that'll be Glue's 6th Esper, I believe, or maybe it's his 5th. Let's check his tracker. It is his
6th.
Okay. And that is Nobody War's second dragon here, and they have all their characters, so now they're just going to be looking for espers. And even though he's a little bit behind in terms of raw progression numbers, his levels are about the same as Drinks Glue's, and now he can exclude a bunch of checks based on the fact that he doesn't have to go find characters anymore, so he can do checks that just are esper item only.
And he does have access to a couple of free checks at this point, both of which are peekable too. He can go into the South Figaro basement and see I think it was Shote, or no, that was Siren that was down there.
Yep.
And then he can also do both of Mog's checks, which are related to one, the Lone Wolf the pickpocket. He'll show up to perform that whole song and dance where he's going to throw Mog off of the cliff, but this time it will be, something else, and Nobody War gets to pick between either whatever the reward is and a high tier item, and the Moogle defense in the original game where you are protecting Terra. This time it will show either a character, the character sprite if it's a character, or it'll show a Moogle sprite if it is an esper or an item. So he'll be able to have a little bit of heads up on whether or not he wants to finish that one off as well.
All right, so Drinks Glue is heading to the opera for a second time today. The show was so good, he had to come back here and make sure his tickets are still valid. But he's this time going to do some Charlie work, as I like to call it, from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and clear out the rats at the top of the Opera House here. Meanwhile, Nobody War's got a bunch of different places that he can now go. I feel like a Dr. Seuss book. Oh, the places he will go. It looks he's just going to pull on the Search the Skies lever, which will get that Doomgaze fight that Drinks Glue accidentally ran into before. So this will be another Esper. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is a dead check.
Yeah, this is the Behemoth suit, I believe.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Drinks Glue is going through some more random encounters. His levels are very good. He's already up to level 30, and he still has 4 more pieces of progression to pick up. So Drinks Glue is sitting in a pretty good spot as well.
Yeah, these encounters here will sort of help him from a bunch of the different free checks that he did a little bit earlier, right? Because he went to South Figaro Prisoner, then he went to Kolingen, and then he just bought the Tzen Thief Esper for a little bit over 5.5K.
Yeah, 10% discount, or sorry, 90% discount from what it cost in the World of Ruin.
All right, and he's getting pretty lucky on these encounters here. Is able to run away from them rather quickly, and he's here to stop Ultros and potentially get his reward, but we do have to fight a boss first, so we'll see what this is here.
And meanwhile, Nobody War getting through his little gimmick fight and going to pick up his Behemoth suit. Does have somebody that can use it. Strago can naturally equip that, and it's not a bad piece of armor. It's just not, it's not a Minerva or anything like that, but it's a lot nicer to see that than a piece of Genji equipment, unfortunately.
There's a big robot on stage. Quick.
How did he get up there?
Somebody get Will Smith.
It's definitely more than 4 tons. I don't know how it was hanging out up there, but...
Yeah, that 4-ton weight wouldn't have done anything to this guy.
Yeah, just drop your body on him.
So the Behemoth suit actually gives, I think, the best stat boost of all of the armor in the game. So, like, from a plus strength perspective and a plus magic power and a plus speed perspective, it just doesn't have the same defensive capability that the Minerva does by nullifying different types of elemental magic, or the Snow Muffler does by negating basically all physical attacks.
Yeah, the Snow Muffler is probably the body armor that I would want to see the most, closely followed by Minerva. But the Behemoth suit is a really good piece of equipment. Not best in slot, obviously, but definitely S tier.
All right, so we'll see what the reward is here, and it is Shadow cosplaying as Setzer this time. So that is Drinks Glue's 6th character, and we have some more checks to talk about here, Turdsman. Shadow gives us access to the little manor parlor area where you recruit him in the vanilla game in the World of Balance. He also will allow us to go to the floating continent, which is a 3-part check, because there are 4 actually different bosses there, but it is 3 parts, so you can get up to 3 rewards by going there, as well as the Velt Cave in the World of Ruin, where you have to rescue him from the behemoth. Oh,
So, I missed what Nobody War had there, but
that
looks
was
like
Gao.
it was. Okay, yeah, that's worth just not worrying about there. But I did also notice that Nobody War had a Magic plus two Esper that had Merton on it as well, which
Juicy.
I'm assuming got from Collingen Inn, which I think Drinks Glue has done as well.
Yeah.
But that's a fantastic Esper to find at any point in this game, especially with this many elemental shields being thrown around.
Well, he did use his flame shield, unfortunately, so that's out for him. However, we do have a lot of other elemental protections in the form of those Minervas, so we'll see if he can actually use that. So one of the things I love about Worlds Collide, and I can't believe we're only talking about this about 50 minutes into it, is that there are multiple ways you can sort of conquer a seed here. We've seen that there are different sets of characters from these different checks, as Nobody War was able to find a path potentially with Gao, and you can continue down that route. He's also found Mog, which Drinks Glue has not found either. And meanwhile, Drinks Glue has found Shadow, and Shadow's path can branch off into many other branches. So one of the interesting things about Worlds Collide is it's not necessarily a key item hunt where some other games are. This is just strictly get your characters and espers or dragons or boss kills or whatever the requirement is to unlock Final Kefka, and you could make it into a key item hunt if you really want to. You could say, hey, in order to defeat Final Kefka or unlock Final Kefka, you need to find Locke and you need to find Golem, let's say, and then it becomes sort of a key item hunt. So the objective system really allows you that plug and play customization that I love about this game.
Yeah, it lets you really decide like what kind of game you want to play this time. If you wanted to do something a little bit more standard, or if you wanted to have a more specific checklist to have to check off.
And just like that, Nobody War is up to 4 Espers now. They just bought their Zen Thief Esper, as well as went down to the Figaro Prisoner spot to get it. Meanwhile, Drinks Glue is heading to a spot that is not character gated. It is the Tritok Cliff, and this spot can reward either an Esper or an item, so this makes sense for him, given the fact that he already has 6 characters.
Yeah, I think typically runners will wait to do this sort of thing if they have Umaro, but in Drinks Glue's case, where he absolutely does not want another character, this is a pretty good quick call with an added incentive of there being a dragon there if you feel like it.
Yeah, so we did take out the dragon. It was a cat hood, which is probably the best helmet in Worlds Collide. Helmets are pretty low down the tier list in terms of pieces of armor. Shields and gear is much better, but the cat hood is sort of special because it rewards the maximum amount of GP per battle, and it also cuts in half some forms of magical elemental damage.
Yeah, I think it's fire, ice, bolt, and I think water or something like that. Quick question from the chat. How were the specific numbers of characters and espers to unlock Final Kefka determined? That is something that you can set yourself if you want to run one of these seeds. But in this case, it was designed to try to make a play experience in a race setting that was roughly 1 hour to an hour 30, hour 45 minutes. In general, 6 characters and 9 espers will probably take you about that much time.
Obviously, you can create the game for as long as you'd like or as short as you'd like. Additionally, with the way that scaling works in Worlds Collide, we found that by getting to 6 characters and 9 espers, usually you do enough fights or bosses whereby the end boss of the final game, Kefka, is not considered just a pushover or way too easy because your characters are so highly leveled, right? So that's one thing that we tried to strive for, is to make it so that the final fight, the final boss, really feels like a final boss and not just a annoying nuisance that you have to overcome. It also... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to start commenting on Drink's Glue. Please finish your thought.
No, I was going to say it also allows the final dungeon, Kefka's Tower, to feel like it is an actual dungeon where you need to split up your party into 3 teams. In the vanilla game,
true.
your characters are all going to be roughly the same levels because of the way the story function works in Final Fantasy VI, where you only have access to certain characters at certain times. In Worlds Collide, typically you have 4 characters and you stick with them throughout most of the game. So those 4 characters are going to be basically your superstars, and everybody else is going to be a meat shield or just a bench warmer that you don't really actually want to use in any of the battles. So bosses with your entire team are relatively, quick throughout most of the game, depending upon what you run into. However, in Kefka's Tower, you're only going to have 1 or at most 2 party members from your full team going up against the boss, so it makes those fights way more difficult than they usually are. As Drink's Glue is giving some extra pets to the dog there, quadruple validating the seed.
Oh, yeah. He's won the next 4 races that he does.
So we did see another character there with Sabin, and Drink's Glue was all the way at the end of that check anyway, so I think that's why he decided to continue on with it. But he could have reset out of there knowing that his reward at the Veld Cave was just a character. However, he's going to go to one of Sabin's 5 checks, the Collapsing House here, and it's the only one for Sabin in the World of Ruin. His other ones include Barren Falls, Phantom Train, Imperial Camp, and Mount Cults in the World of Balance.
Yeah, I think I do agree with this play. He didn't need that 7th character, obviously, but Sabin's checks are pretty breezy, with the exception of maybe, Mount Colts is a bit of a walk, but and on top of that, he can check, or he can peek what's in the Phantom Train before going through the whole thing, and in the Imperial Camp, you only have to fight the one fight before you'll find out if it's a character or not at the end of that. So another check that he can peek at without having to fully commit to a ton of time.
Well, he was able to peek this check, and it is not a character holding up the Collapsing House. It is a NPC soldier sprite. So this is either an Esper or an item, and we'll see what the reward is here after some posturing. And it is going to be Ramu, so that is the final Kefka unlock there for Drink's Glue, pending, of course, he goes and stuffs enough fish into Sid's face.
Yes, has to take care of one last little wrinkle before he is allowed to go to the final boss, which he's going to take care of right away, because his levels are pretty good. I don't think he has to worry too much about grabbing a dragon before going into the final boss or anything like that.
Yeah, 36 is usually pretty good. So
I like how he checked there. He's like, all right, what am I doing to this guy again? I mean, yeah. Okay, all right, I'll save. All right.
All right, so let's talk about the saving Sid mechanic. So Sid starts out with 120 HP, and he loses 1 HP per second. The only way to have him gain HP is to feed him those fast fish, and the fast fish will gain him some amount of HP. We doubled it in Worlds Collide from what the vanilla is, so this will go a little bit faster than in the vanilla game. But that is the only way that Sid gains HP. Once he's over 255 HP, then he's considered saved, and that request is done. He is considered dead, obviously, when his HP hits. It's technically under 30, but we'll call it 0. So if you sit there and do nothing for 2 minutes, Sid will die, and that is probably the longest amount of time it should take you to save or kill Sid. So this usually takes less than 1 minute, or 2 minutes rather, as there you see. Just 3 of those fast fish, and Sid feels a lot better. Personally, I think saving Sid's a lot quicker than letting Sid die, even though Sid is losing 1 HP per second, just because those fast fish swim to the shore way more often than the slow fish, which are the ones that you are supposed to feed Sid if you want him to lose HP.
And in addition to that, we saw Drink's Glue go down to the shore, see that there was no fast fish there, and then he walked back up to Sid, waited for him to get back in bed, and talked to him again. That is how you can reset the fish you have available to you. If you don't have the one that you want for whichever objective you're working on.
All right, so it looks like Mog's ability is Sword Tech, so that's an interesting one. We can actually upgrade all of the Sword Techs all the way to Sword Tech 8 if we had access to Cyan's Dream, similar to how it is in the vanilla game, but we don't have that. However, the Sword Tech ability works slightly different in Worlds Collide than in the vanilla game. You'll see the Sword Tech meter will go up way faster in this game than it does in the vanilla game, and that's on purpose. We didn't really want to wait around for Sword Tech to charge up, because then it would make that ability relatively useless.
Yeah.
Because most of the higher end Sword Techs are really good, but we don't want to sit there waiting for a terribly long time. So we adjusted the speed at which that bar moved up. I know that some of the later games just allow you to pick what Sword Tech you want, and then the character will wait as long as it would have taken, which is also an interesting approach, but I like this one better because it will do the action as soon as you're done with it, and there's not a lot of guesswork to it.
Yeah, and it has that added little wrinkle of making sure that you press it at the right time as well.
Alright, so Drinks Glue did decide to take on another dragon, so he should be ready for the final Kefka showdown here. He does have 18 checks, so 22 was the skip, and it looks like I'm not quite sure what he's doing here. Was he going to visit the Coliseum?
He's gonna go visit the old man, it looks like.
There is one treasure chest in here, and if you've ever played an Archipelago seed of Worlds Collide, you'll know that that's where that is. Because in Archipelago, there is a setting where all of the treasures are rewards. So there are, instead of 62 checks, there are 300 and something checks. So yeah, thank you, Glue, for showing that off.
That's a really good way to find out that they hid little... that's something I really like from the Super Nintendo Final Fantasy games, is all the towns have a bunch of little goodies in them that you can collect if you explore around enough and, you know, kind of push into weird sections of the map, and there's a bunch of them in Final Fantasy VI. I'm sure there's still like 5 or 6 of them that I have completely forgotten about, but playing that Archipelago is a really good way to realize, like, oh, there's a bucket at the bottom of Mobliz that has an item in it. What? Okay.
Alright, so Nobody War here is taking on his Magimaster fight using Grand Train as well as the Fixed Dice offering. So the offering will get around Magimaster's high evade, as well as Sword Tech 1 will get around Magimaster's very high defense, and Throw will also get around Magimaster's very high defense. But unfortunately, Egger is the one slinging dice here. We got our Gambling Prince, and he's going to go down, and down goes most of Nobody War's offense as well.
Yeah, very unfortunate. It looks like, I forget what Mog is jumping with here, but he is deciding to run with Sword Tech and maybe just do a little bit of healing. This Magimaster is substantially nastier than the one that Drinks Glue had to contend with.
Yeah, so that's what happens when you run into more difficult bosses as your scaling gets higher and higher. They become more difficult with the higher levels, but those dice rolls should finish it off.
Ooh,
there.
very
nicely done. Yeah, so that's the thing with the Fixed Dice and the offering, right? Did you see how long that turn took? Yes, he did do a lot of damage. However, there's a lot of times where a Fixed Dice offering can overkill a boss, where the boss is actually dead on the second turn, and you have to wait for the other 2 turns to finish happening, which is quite cumbersome.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. I think that's why, in general, it tends to be a little better early on, since you don't necessarily have as many options to deal with the nastier enemy weaknesses that you might run into here. Uh-oh.
Yeah, so
yeah, Drinks Glue taking another dragon in the tower here. This is not something we see very often.
Yeah, so this is the Dirt Durgan. I believe the Dirt Durgan is actually weak to sleep, but most of the time that's pretty useless, because if you attack it, then it wakes up.
And especially in this case where Glue has a Celeste swinging an Illumina around for almost 5,000 damage.
Yeah, so in Final Fantasy VI, physical damage formula, the levels are way more important than your character's strength. Whereas the magical damage formula is more about the spell power and the magic power stat of your character than the levels.
Yeah, that tends to be the spread. If you find a good Esper with magic buffs on it, or you happen to have your mage is able to equip an enhancer sword, stuff like that, will get you a lot more mileage than for example, the +5 strength you're going to get off of a Genji armor. That's not really going to result in that much extra damage.
Alright, so Drinksklu here, walking their way through Kefka's tower. As we mentioned, he had to split his party up into several different smaller parties. So this party right here is just Strago and Sabin, and although we got Sabin recently, and he did join at the average level of all of our party members, remember, Drinksklu got his characters very early, so some of those characters are going to be pretty low levels.
And I think Strago here has a lot of options available to him with Magitech and a lot of really good spells. I think he won't have too much trouble taking care of himself. However, Sabin...
pour one out for Sabin, folks.
Yeah,
took one for the team.
Didn't put his winter coat on, so he's got blasted by Merton here. Which this
you would think with a tank top that would have shielded him.
Yeah, he got a nasty sunburn.
Meanwhile, Nobody War is doing the lone wolf check, and we do see Terra peeking out of the cave there. So that would be the reward if we had Umaro in our party. So that's interesting to know where yet another character is in this particular seed here. So we are about an hour and 5 in. If you haven't yet, ff6worldscollide.com is the website if you would like to get started. There's a link to our Discord where some people are very helpful, and a link to the wiki with a bunch of resources of all of the things that I've talked about, but in text or video form for people that don't enjoy my voice.
Yes, lots of very handy information there, and a bunch of us who just really like talking about this game. Looks like a lock there. So that's like you said earlier with the pathways. Like he got Nobody War got Mog relatively early. Just
That's
ended
correct.
up getting Setzer and Celeste later on down the track. So this could have been a completely different path that Nobody War could have taken through the game.
Yeah, so Locke will open up a few different checks, including the that is the gold Durgan, giving Drinksklu the business there. Obviously, he put the wrong shield on, put the fire shield on, and was not able to survive those attacks from the gold dragon.
We'll see if he decides to go back into that.
Thankfully, he saved after that first fight.
Yeah.
Although Ultros 2 is not that big of a deal, where it's not that huge of a time loss here. I'm not quite sure he needs this dragon, so we'll see if he skips it, or if he just likes putting, those busts on the wall, if you will.
Yeah, he's getting his trophy room nice and fleshed out here.
Add another dinosaur head.
Natural jumping Sabin, that would have been a very interesting character to have gotten early on,
Sure.
Especially with all the different things that everybody's got access to.
Yeah, we found 700 dragon horns to seed, so...
Yeah. Give or take.
Meanwhile, Nobody War is engaging in another ungated character check, which is the Narsh battle, or Kefka at Narsh here. And we know that the reward is not a character because we spoke to an NPC before we started this, and oh hey look, it's another Ultros.
Oh. This guy. Oh, he's not going to be here for very long, though, so we're going to have to talk fast about this.
Yes,
yeah, Kefka at Narsh is...
won.
It's an interesting check. You do have to make 2 parties for it, so it can be kind of tricky early on when you only have 3 characters, or even after you find your first one, your first extra one, can be a bit of a slog. But like you mentioned, you do get to see what you're going to get ahead of time, or at least whether or not it's going to be a character. And also, at the end of it, it just kind of teleports you down here to Arvis's house, so you don't have to actually make the whole walk back.
All right, we are seeing a Moogle here, so that means this is not a character. Because remember, you have to have Mog in order to do this check. So you can't have Mog and recruit Mog. That would be Moogleception. We can't have that here. So this is going to be either an Esper or an item, which is good for Nobody War, because he right now is 2 behind in the Esper count. However, he is at 19 checks. So that means he is most likely going to get Kefka Tower skip. So even though Nobody War is still a little bit behind, he's basically going to be at where Drinks Glue is right now once he unlocks Final Kefka. Or rather, once he does 2 more checks after this one.
Mm-hmm. And there are some easy options for that.
Especially with Lock.
Yeah, because I believe I'm thinking I'm getting this right. The dragons do not count as bosses, but they do count as checks, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so yeah, there's the Toilet Atma, which is our really fantastic community name, in my opinion, for the super boss that is hanging out in the bathroom of Kefka's tower, which... good on Kefka for having the wherewithal to have a bathroom in his evil lair.
When you gotta go, you gotta go.
Exactly. So that would count as both a boss and a check. So that or the dragon that's hanging out in the middle of the...
Drinks Glue put the warp stone about 3/4 of the way down his list in the middle of the vast nothingness, just so he doesn't accidentally warp out of Kefka's tower.
Completely short-circuited what I was talking about. What
sorry.
are you doing? Menu safety, that's correct, chat, yes.
Yes. Oh, here's a nasty fight with only 2 characters. So this is the boss of the engine room, and why it's particularly nasty is this boss is not going to kill Drinks Glue. However, It is going to definitely slow him down, because every time one of these tentacles go, they have a chance to grab one of your characters, and once they grab you, you basically lose out on a few turns while you have to wait for them to discard you.
Yeah, it can be a real time sink, especially this late in the game if you don't. Like, Strago's doing pretty good, throwing out tech missiles, making sure he can take out these guys in one hit. That
is the best that fight could have gone.
Yeah, exactly. The other unfortunate thing they do is they will cast slow on characters before they grab them. So that can be a way to protect yourself from any shenanigans that these things might cause. If you pop a... running shoes, I think it's called Hermes sandals, and some of the other Final Fantasies. If you pop those on, you're immune to slow, so that character will not get grabbed. And in addition to that, like once they grab you, that character is just out of commission for, I would say a good minute and a half of real time.
Yeah, it's never fun finding that boss
Pretty
in
significant.
Kefka's tower. Meanwhile, Nobody War is doing one of Locke's checks. We didn't really get a chance to talk about Locke's areas of the game that he has access to. One of them is the South Figaro Cave, where the Tunnel Armor boss is in vanilla. But today, it is a spicy chicken. Who ordered the wings, folks?
That was me. I'm sorry.
And it's a pretty relatively easy boss on Drinks Glue's side, Narapa, susceptible to instant death. So this X Zone, if it hits, will end this fight right away.
Another kind of time sink boss, too, with all of these condemned casts at the beginning, but not immune to instant death, so bye.
See you later. Locke also gives us access to the Norse Weapon Shop, where you have a choice of Ragnarok the Sword or Ragnarok the Esper in the vanilla game. In Worlds Collide, it's a choice between an Esper and an item, or an item and an item. So we'll see if Nobody War turns up with the goods there. And then Locke's last check is Phoenix Cave, which we probably won't see here because it is a longer check where you do have to divide up your party into 2. And there is an optional dragon down there, but Nobody War already has a lot of levels from the plethora of dead checks that he's run into. So yeah. I don't suspect he wants to go get the dragon there. As he does get Starlet, that is going to be Esper number 8 for Nobody War, and he might run into Esper number 9 here momentarily in the Norse Weapon Shop, and he is at 21 checks, so he is definitely going to get Kefka Tower skip no matter what. So this will be nice to show off that mechanic here on Nobody War's screen.
A very interesting boss selection in these statue spots. It's pretty much nothing but
tame.
time killers. They're not tough, but it's with Narapa and the tentacles, and this guy doing this nonsense. It's a lot of enemies that just sort of suck up real time. They're not necessarily tough, but you're not going to be able to just slide right through them, unfortunately.
All right, Nobody War gets a Illumina or Behemoth choice, so won't get his skip there, but does get a nice beefy sword for one of his characters to use, which is nice. So he's going to have to find a different spot for his last Esper here. Good. And
he was walking out of Narsh. I'm so glad he turned around.
Yeah, I believe... Was Tritok an Esper?
I think so, right?
I don't recall.
Oh, shoot. I don't remember.
Well, we're going to find out either way.
Well, this is the play too, right? Like this is a good conservation of time.
Taking a look at Nobody War's tracker, he just has Daryl's Tomb, which he already knows is Gao. Oh no, yes, he already knows is Gao because he reset out of that, and the Opera House Disruption, which we know is Shadow, besides the Phoenix Cave, based on the checks that he has access to. So. If this is not an Esper, he might have to go get a character just to get more checks to unlock more options to get his last Esper, which is kind of annoying and cumbersome, and you never really want to have to do that. Yeah,
it's unfortunate to run into it, but I think Drinks Glue did wind up with, I think Shadow was his 7th character, which did give him access to that free check that had an Esper in it. So sometimes, even though the requirements are only 6 characters, you might end up in a situation where you have to grab a couple extra ones just to get the Espers that you need. Meanwhile, Drinks Glue heading into the final fight.
Here we go. So this is the final boss. There are 4 tiers to the final boss. If one of your characters dies on the transition from one tier to another, then they are replaced by Meat Shield Scrub on the bench, and we do not want that to happen. So Edgar, at his 61 HP, better get healed sooner before later. So let's talk about this first tier here. It is 3 different parts. This is basically the armor check of Final Kefka. They do mostly physical attacks and very powerful physical attacks, as you've seen. The head is the first target here, weak to fire, and will death counter with Quake if left alive last, which is something that will surely either wipe the party or severely incapacitate us going forward. That long arm there is susceptible to instant death, so this X zone should take care of that. And that balled up fist is weak to water, and we do have somebody with throw, so we can throw some water edges at that. Meanwhile, Nobody War did get their final Esper for Go mode, and they have Kefka's Tower skip, so we'll see if they decide they want to learn a couple spells here, so they're going to take on another dragon, and they'll be in Kefka's Tower momentarily.
Yeah, there was Ultima on that Starlet that they collected, so that'd be a very handy thing to have.
Yeah, so Ultimate
really nice.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was a really nice spell to have. Not automatically the best thing, as much as it might seem like Ultima is the perfect key for every single lock. The animation time for the spell is a little bit long. It's not too terrible, but it's a fair bit longer than Merton, for example. And in Worlds Collide, we have set it to 254 MP per cast. So usually at around level 40, I think Realm is one of the characters that has the highest natural MP. And she typically only has around 5 to 550 at that point. So without plenty of MP healing, you're going to have to be pretty judicious in where you are going to throw those off, as Drinks Glue makes it up to tier 2.
Yeah, so tier 2 is 4 different parts. We have first the Tiger there. That Tiger is weak to ice, so we should see that Ice 3 spell go off on them. We have Magic all the way on the left-hand side, pointing to the left of your screen with the blonde hair. He is susceptible to mute and only casts magic spells, so that'll essentially nullify him. We have Tools, which is towards the middle. and they does sort of like the Magitech type of attacks, but they are susceptible to instant death, so that part of the boss just died. And then there's the blue guy there, called Hit, and he's not really a threat because he just does a physical attack every turn. However, he counters on death with 10 hits, which may be a problem if your party is at low HP. Because remember, if one of your characters dies on the transition between tiers, they are gone forever.
Yeah, this is sort of an interesting piece of the final boss as well. Like, whereas the first tier is a pretty obvious, like you said, it's a pretty obvious physical defense check. Like, hey, are you still wearing leather armor? Uh-oh. But this one is a little bit trickier in terms of what they have access to. That Tiger Face, for example, if you let him hang around for, I believe it's 3 or 4 attacks, his 4th or 5th will be a zombie inflicting regular attack, which is, as far as this game is concerned, that's as good as being dead. So if that character is a zombie by the time the tiers transition, then that character is gone.
Yep, zombie is considered a death status in Final Fantasy VI. So hopefully Nobody War does not save over his over his stuff, because I believe he forgot to go and save Sid. So he will get laughed at when he tries to step on the switch here. Yep, and say that unlock final Kefka objective has not yet been complete. So he has to go and make sure he goes to save Sid. So he's going to have to revert to a previous save or just warp out of here and try again. And it looks like he's going to warp out and try again, because once you use your Kefka Tower skip, you do not get it back a second time. So good heads-up play from Nobody War there. Going to reset, and oh no, he doesn't have another save to go to.
Oh, that's really unfortunate.
So we're going to see some more shenanigans? I tried to say that.
that kind of works.
Yeah, it almost worked.
That's good enough for our purposes.
Yeah, so what I usually tell runners is this game gives you 3 save slots. Make usage of them. Yes.
Yeah, some popular areas to do that would be the bottom of, the Magitech Research Facility. That can kind of screw you up if you, for example, if that Magimaster fight really, wasn't doable, you would want to have that in a separate slot so you wouldn't have to
be stuck on that ride.
Yeah, get stuck on that, have to figure out some sort of weird magic to get through it. And there's a couple other places. The Phantom Train it's kind of a bummer to get stuck in there too, for example. But yeah, rotate your saves a little bit just to make sure.
All right, so here is the 3rd tier of Kefka. This one is only 2 parts, but it is very dangerous. The girl absorbs every single element and has 9,999 HP. Will both heal and revive the other part, so we want to take her out first. The other part will deal some nasty AoE spells, including Merton and W-Wind against us. However, his most dangerous part is when he's under 10,000 HP, because he will use Meteo upon every turn and has a chance to counter any attack with either Meteo or Train. And remember, we did fix the Dark status in Worlds Collide, so that will definitely affect your physical attacks here. And when he dies, he will death counter with 2 instances of an instant death physical special called Calmness. And the ways to mitigate around that are to summon some Espers that will negate physical damage, or to cast Life 3 on your party, and I don't think we have Life 3.
No, I don't believe so, and I don't think we saw Fenrir or Golem either, which are those are the 2 popular ones. Vanish can also work in a pinch. We see Drinks Glue here using Phantom.
Yep.
Really tough to get it to work right, but it feels great when you pull it off. Unfortunately, I think this quick is going to negate that on Strago there.
Yeah, so Strago won't be vanished. However, the 3 other characters will be. So even if we lose Strago, he's still going to keep 3 of his other strongest party members. And thankfully,
Yeah.
Sleep decided to attack 2 of the vanished characters, so that is a double miss, and we're up to Final Kefka just as Nobody War stuffs enough fish into Sid's mouth, and he can now go ahead and go back into the tower. Unfortunately for him, he's going to have to go back into the entrance, so his tower climb is going to be a bit longer than what it should have been.
He is going to at least have that one statue boss taken care of. He is going to have to go through the, I think it was one of the Ultroses.
Yep.
That was hanging out in where the Inferno spot usually is. But yeah, this is unfortunate. But thankfully, Nobody War quickly corrected and is going to make his trip up the tower here sooner rather than later, as Drinks Glue gets to the main event. The big man himself coming down in for a high five. Let's talk about Final Kefka.
Yeah, so Final Kefka has a bit over 60,000 HP, and if you do more than 30,000 damage on the first turn, you'll skip what is his Fallen One ability. Drinks Glue did not do that on purpose to wait it out, because he knows he has the Mega Elixir from that Magi Master fight. Kefka will start to counter when you get under 30,000 HP left with things like Hyperdrive and Havoc Wing. If he's under 10,000 HP, he might counter with Ultima. However, he does charge up for an ability called Goner, in which he waves off that counterattack phase. So we'll hopefully see him after this Tech Missile get into counterattack phase, and then he might charge up for Goner. Here comes a Hyperdrive. So that's going to kill Celeste. See you later. So this is still a sticky situation, as Drinks Glue does not want to suffer an Ultima counter, and he knows he's done about 40,000 damage at this point. So he's probably going to wait for the Goner cast in order to go ahead and start attacking again. Unfortunately, can't cast Berserk on Celeste because that Illumina has super high magic evade. That sword is the best defensive weapon in the game, folks, no cap.
Yeah, I think 40 of each.
All right, so here comes a
very
risk.
effective.
Drinks Glue taking a risk here by going for that attack. The final time is when Kefka cracks and flashes, so we'll see. It's going to be coming up soon. If it's not this attack, then it's going to be the next one. However, it is that one, the first flash, and Drinks Glue has finished. His time, 1:25:31. Get your GGs in the chat for Drinks Glue.
Yeah, an excellent showing. Had a couple of speed bumps early on, but managed to skip right through them nice and quick. 1:25:31 is a really good time. That's a very respectable time, considering the added unlock requirement of going and saving Sid.
And doing the Opera House. The Opera House.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that.
Cutscene is about a 4.5 minute cutscene. So you take away saving Sid, you take away the Opera House, and you're looking at about a 1:20-ish time for this particular seed, which is pretty good. Remember, Turdsman said earlier, we determined that we wanted the runs to be about an hour and 20, hour and a half, hour and 45. So this time certainly fits within those times. And typically what we do is we drag the runner in for an interview after the race to talk about what their strategies were. So we're going to head and do that now with Drinks Glue, as Nobody War makes his walk back through the tower. We're joined by Drinks Glue. Congratulations on your victory. Well played to you, good sir.
Thank you, good sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about why you love playing Worlds Collide and why you think it should be featured in a marathon speedrun? Or speedrun marathon.
First and foremost, my favorite thing about Final Fantasy VI and Worlds Collide is that for the better part of the past 20 years, I would do various playthroughs. I do like solo. My personal favorite character I've been able to play through is to do a Cyan with a double Tempest, and you pull him through a bunch of magic power, and you can do obscene amount of damage with the procs, whatever. And it's just cool, right? But on the flip side of that, it takes you like 40 hours to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's what I like about Worlds Collide is it's more a condensed playthrough, and then two playthroughs are the same with the randomization and the features you enable yourself. So it's just a more condensed playthrough, but you still get to experience all those weird quirks that you love about the game, and that's my favorite thing about Worlds Collide.
So tell us a little bit about this run in particular with a go-go plus Magitech plus throw start and how that sort of affected what your strategy was in the beginning of the game up until the point you got to Magimaster.
Sometimes it feels like, life's moments lead up to that, just that Magimaster showed up on your screen sometimes.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had Reflect for him. It was a pretty powerful start because throwing itself is arguably the best starting ability of the game. Follow that up with another one that you're going to throw up there in the higher tiers with Magitech. And Strago doesn't have the best stats, but his Magic Tower does stand out, and then some earrings, and that's well more than enough. And Go-Go can just mimic whichever one happens to be the strongest. So it was a pretty powerful start, all things considered.
Yeah, you did show us off the Coliseum, getting an Illumina for a relatively cheap piece of headgear. So that was really nice to see that particular play work out for you pretty well, although it did take you 2 times to do it. Such is the nature of Coliseum AI, right? And then the Reflect on Magimaster, you want to tell us a little bit about how you sort of came up with that outside of the box strategy there?
Oh yeah. So in Magimaster's vanilla script, his vanilla commands are Ice 3, Bolt 3, and Fire 3. And in his script, if he detects he has Reflect cast on himself, what he does is he starts casting, Fire 3, Ice 3, Bolt 3 on himself, and it bounces back to your party, right? Well, in Worlds Collide, we have an ability or a setting called ability scaling. And those Fire 3s and Ice 3s and Bolt 3s he's typically casting get shuffled and replaced with different tiers of elemental abilities. For example, at level 1, instead of casting Ice 3 for Ice Smell, he can be casting Blizzard, right? And Blizzard, if he has Reflect on himself, is going to target himself and pierce Reflect. It's not going to bounce back at the party. So basically what you do, or you want to do in that situation, is just get Reflect on him. Don't trigger his shield chain so he starts negating elements. You just kind of either A, sit there until he kills himself, or B, sit there until he's weak enough or you've had a chance to recover, and then you can just kind of fire away until you finish him up.
Yeah, so that's really good heads-up strategy there. Worlds Collide is one of those games where you do need both vanilla game knowledge, as you mentioned, his vanilla script, and you also need randomizer game knowledge, specifically this randomizer, in terms of routing and where to go, because we did notice that you ran into a lot of characters early on, and you got to 6 before you got your Espers. Did that change sort of your plans as to where you wanted to go?
I would not necessarily. I have a very few hard rolls, and one of them is I absolutely despise Draco checks. There's lots of reasons to. They're all inconveniently located in various parts of the map, and then he has gives you access to 3 of them, and they're all in the C and D tiers of checks. They're the longest checks in the game. So generally, if you can avoid doing those, you'll generally produce better times. I was very fortunate that there's characters outside of his checks, because then you can just kind of ideally get your requirements and never do them. It's when you kind of get down to the nit and grit and you have a handful left when you want to start trying to get into Strago's checks. But it was very fortunate to have all those characters existing outside of Strago's part of the world, because you never have to visit that part of the world.
Fortunately for you, we did see it for Nobody War. The Burning House and Ebbett's Rock both were items, and Mog was at the bottom of Fnatic's Tower. So Nobody War had the level advantage and the scaling advantage early on. He just unfortunately went through 2 of the longer checks in the game and wasn't rewarded, and ran into some other dead checks along the way. But it seems like there may have been 2 different paths through the seed, because he got both Mog and then Lock from Mog. So that's one of the things I love about Worlds Collide, is it's not a sort of key item hunt in the way that a lot of other randomizers are. You could take multiple paths through a seed to get to where you wanted to go. Turdsman, you have any questions for Drinks Glue while we have him in the booth here?
Nothing comes to mind. I think you covered a lot of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. I guess I would be curious what your method is for determining which checks you want to pick. Like Schwantz mentioned, you got a lot of characters really quick. So what was your thought process in picking one pathway over another?
Well, I start after some free checks and doing the Opera House. It was kind of like, how can I get checks that are closely lumped together. And fortunately, the fortunate thing with Edgar's is they're all in the same spot if you're on the World of Ruin. So it kind of let's start with Edgar's checks. I think I took some fights on the way down to the engine room because there's no save point there. So just being a little bit overly cautious because you do have to commit some time before you can see what's waiting for you. And if you can't really nope out of it, you gotta
dice rolls.
really
Jeez.
get
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Sorry,
Sorry,
go ahead.
he got 3 triple 4s in a row.
Beautiful. Let's hit the crap stable after.
Yeah.
No kidding.
But if you can just do checks, it doesn't make much of a difference if you do 2 checks that are on the other side of the world. If you just happen to be on that side of the other world, just do them while you're there. So whatever's closely lumped together. So that's why the plan was Edgar's checks. Then we found Celeste, and we found Celeste checks. Opera House also happens to maybe not that far to the left of Magitech Factory. So just Magitech Factories, 3 checks in one. There's one right next door, and just whatever's geographically close, and then go from there.
So you take travel time into account quite a bit, picking where you're going to go next.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, which is odd because I know a lot of runners will do what's my fastest check I have available now, or what are the attributes of the different checks I have, right? And exclude ones that only offer certain things or ones that you can peak. So there's a lot of different strategies that you can choose with this game, which makes it interesting too.
Yeah, that tends to be my heuristic, except Drinks Glue has been blowing me out regularly over the past few sets of events, so maybe I want to rethink that a little bit.
He's not the Kefka Grand Prix champ for nothing, folks.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, the pros of doing all of the quick checks or only quick checks is that if it kind of puts you on a string of where you can keep just doing quick checks just because of the character luck that you happen to stumble into, right? But if you're flying over like the medium time checks to get to the quick checks, and you run out of quick checks, ultimately you end up spending more time. That kind of adds up to another check you could have already done anyways throughout the course of a seed.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally like to kind of hone it in on what the check can or can't give once you try to round out your requirements.
Yep, that makes sense. So, Drinks Glue, any other final thoughts that you want to share for our submission for AGDQ Winter 2020 Marathon?
Nothing I haven't already said or said in the past, but that's what I love about Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide is that Final Fantasy VI is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's a nice, condensed, quick version, especially someone in my age demographic, in the Middle Ages, if you will. I won't spill out my exact age here, but
You're the
it's
bubonic plague in the Middle Ages. Come on,
the 20 to 70 crowd.
It's so much. It's so much more fun to be able to do that playthrough I mentioned and not having to go a entire game and kind of get to experience all those things. And what we do an hour and a half here, as opposed to having gone all the way through the game. There's only some people in the world that can beat Final Fantasy 6 under 10 in 10 hours, and there's like 40 of them on the speedrun.com leaderboard. So those are the people that can do that in that type of time, right? But the rest of us can't.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Consistently, yeah. And that's kind of just randomized in general. It allows you to get a condensed playthrough, experience different things, and it's like the Game Genie equivalent. You just plug it in, give yourself some things, and go from there.
Well, Turdsman, you got anything else for Drinks Glue before we let him go?
No, I think that's it.
All right, great. So thank you so much, Drinks Glue, for volunteering to be a runner. Can't have the races without the runners. And for being a just general good ambassador for the Worlds Collide community, which is one of my favorite things about the game. It's not even the game itself, but the people that are running the game. We're a pretty welcoming bunch, even though we sound like get off our lawn types. Thanks, Drinks Glue, for painting us like that. But yeah, thank you for doing that, and we'll see you on the next one, big guy.
Yeah. And thank you guys for due commentary. Thank you, Turdsman. Thank you, Schwantz. And thank anybody who tuned in to this nonsense.
That's Drinks Glue validating the seed 4 times after the Velt Cave. So, thank you so much, dog, and we'll catch you later.
Later.
Alright, so Nobody War on Tier 3, just getting hit with the train. So, this means that we are under 10,000 HP, and unfortunately, he wanted to queue up that Phantom, but got hit with the train first, and here comes the Meteo. Very inaccurate, but does do a lot of damage, and there is the sword hit. Calmness will unfortunately take out Celeste, but 3 of his 4 party members do survive and are heading up to Final Kefka. I think Celeste might have been the weakest of his 4 characters there. Strago pulling out huge damage with that tech missile. Edgar is rolling like his mortgage depends on it at the craps table. And Mog with the boots and horn and aura lance, the dream jumper there.
Yeah, Edgar firmly in the 50-minute mark of Uncut Gems, just throwing out incredible luck. Seems to have avoided the ending of Uncut Gems, spoilers, and is moving on to the end. Both Edgar and Mog are, they both have multi-hit abilities going on. Edgar with the Offering and Mog with the Dragon Horn. So if Nobody War was going to have to lose a character, Celeste was definitely the one to lose.
Yeah, so we do see Locke coming in off the bench here. We can potentially equip him with something halfway decent, but I believe he's going to be used for Mega Elixir duty here after this Fallen one.
Yep.
He queued that up way too early. Yep, that is
bummer.
That is unfortunate. However, we do have the best healing spell in the game here, Heal Force, and Edgar's able to use Cure 3, so this is okay. Unless Edgar gets hit with a Hyperdrive here, and then it's not okay. We are officially not okay, folks. Alright, so Mog just comes down with a bunch of damage. And
I know what's going on through Nobody War's head at this point. It's a I gotta get going, I gotta get moving. I can lose a character or two. That's okay. Here comes the Goner phase. So I was gonna drop that Ice Shield off of Mog and got Strago back up. This is still pretty good shape.
Yeah, those dice rolls have got a hit, and he's gonna use Locke to throw the shield and Strago for the tech missile. So we better hope that he gets a lot of decent rolls here, because otherwise he's gonna lose to this Goner. And here it comes. All of the players on the ground will probably die here. Strago has a chance to survive with that force shield, but I think he's at too low of HP here to survive.
Yeah, 300's not going to be quite enough.
All right, so there's everybody dead. Mog has to be careful of a counterattack here. So up comes the Oh, and there is the Havoc Wing, unfortunately, taking Nobody War's death out of it. And there, unfortunately, folks, you can see one wrong move can destroy your run. And that's one of the reasons why we sort of made the Kefka requirements as they are. Because if he was at a much higher level, he would have been able to tank some of these counterattacks and not have to make such precise or precision moves there.
Yeah, I'm curious if he thought that the Mega Elixir would have been okay to use at that time, because maybe he thought that he had gotten into, like, out of the Fallen One phase, but alas.
Or I think it was, he may have thought that Kefka's ATB was faster than it sort of was. That will definitely happen sometimes where, where Kefka's ATB, if it fills up even before you cue the attack, then that is what will happen. You'll get the right result for the wrong reason, I guess, is the way to sort of say that.
It's an understandable, it's an understandable mistake to make. And having that Mog in the air, which is something, you want to get him up there as fast as possible. And when Nobody War made that selection, it was the right thing to do. But unfortunately, it shook out a little bit different over the next few seconds that turned that Mog into a bit of a liability.
Yeah, because if Mog was able to, he did not counter during that particular phase. But a Havoc Wing to the face is going to always kill you unless you have a Snow Muffler equipped, because that is the best piece of defensive item in the entire game. So Nobody War unfortunately doesn't have a mic plugged in, so I'll just say thank you so much, Nobody War, for volunteering to race as well. And be featured on Restream. Another great ambassador for the community.
Yes.
With posting to our various different socials, youtube.com/FF6 Worlds Collide, if you want to watch some other races. And so that was our randomizer, Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide. Turdsman, you got any other final thoughts or things you want to say about the game and why you enjoy playing it and what you like about watching it as a viewer as well?
Well, I think I'm going to end up kind of repeating a lot of stuff that you and Drinks Glue have said. The fact that it is sort of a bite-sized RPG experience is my favorite part of this randomizer and all the rest of them. Like Glue, Final Fantasy VI is probably my favorite one. So it's really great to be able to sort of re-experience it in this sort of new way each time. And I know so much about the way that the regular game works, and so that way it's kind of helpful to be able to kind of like go by vibes with it a little bit. Man, that might be why I'm firmly in the middle of the pack for a lot of times, but it's just such a fun game. Like, Final Fantasy VI isn't that tough in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a randomizer really push you to think about what's going on, to think about how all of the little disparate pieces might fit together in a unique way is just so much fun. And I love watching it because of what you said earlier. The community is just incredible. Like you just mentioned, like, Nobody War was a huge part of me getting into it at the beginning. He was there for a lot of the nighttime stuff. Which, since I work swing shift, that was a lot easier for me to get access to a couple, questions I had. Nobody War was typically there to answer. Like, Drinks Glue is, again, like, he's come a really long way and is a huge part of the community. Everybody's just so nice. I just really like it here.
So one of the other things is, we mentioned there's kind of multiple ways through the seed. There's also lots of different ways to solve the seed. We saw two very, very different builds for Final Kefka, right? We saw one with, the fixed ice offering plus the jump plus the tech missile and the Illumina. And for Drinks Glue, we saw somebody using the lore of Grand Train heavily, plus Go-Go, plus tech missile, plus the Illumina. Right, so there were multiple builds you could make in order to solve the final boss there. So That's one of the other things I like, is that sometimes you'll have two people play the same exact seed and come up with completely, entirely different party compositions in order to make it through the seed and win.
Yeah, it's a really creative and clever randomizer. As you mentioned before, the key item hunt randomizers, like, I still really like a lot of those. The Free Enterprise community showed up in the middle of this. That's a big favorite of mine. I really like the Chrono Trigger one, but what I think this randomizer hones in on is that Final Fantasy VI is about the characters. It's got a huge cast. And they're all really unique and different, and this game really focuses in on that and makes it the central point of the randomizer. Which characters you have access to, that's going to determine where you're going to go, what you're going to see, and I just think that's a really clever way of taking the existing game and, like, putting a new set of clothes on it.
Yeah, so hopefully that is enough information for the deciders that be to choose our particularly lovely game for inclusion in their AGDQ Winter 2025. So appreciate taking your time to watch this. Thank you so much, Turdsman, as well, to helping me out with both commentary and tracking the race. Makes our job as talking pretty easy when somebody is behind the scenes marking all the numbers appropriately, so we could do things like speculate on what runners are going from point A to point B, or explaining the minutia of different game mechanics, like, why are we stuffing Sid's face with fish?
It's a good question to ask.
Yep. So anyway, thank you so much, and I think that'll do it for us, and we'll see everybody on the next one. Thanks. Take care now. Peace out.
Thank you. Have a good one.